Hi, and welcome to our second Google Hangout in a series of four. I'm Sonia DeWitt, PCA's Program Manager. If you have any questions about this Hangout or anything else regarding the Triple Impact Competitor Scholarship, please don't hesitate to email me at sonia@positivecoach.org. Today we're going to be talking about financial aid, and then the next Hangout will be dealing with financial literacy and personal finance. So everything you need to know, cards to credit scores, taxes, and budgeting for college. It will take place on Tuesday in 3 weeks from today, October 21st at 6 p.m. Pacific. The fourth and last Hangout will be dealing with how to create a professional image and also finishing up your college applications. This will take place on November 18th. All of these Hangouts can be viewed on YouTube at any time convenient for you, and I will continue to email out those links after each presentation. I want to thank Deloitte again, which has been the sponsor for this program for the past 4 years, and we wouldn't be able to offer this without their support, so thank you. We will start the presentation shortly. If you're using your Google Plus account to view this, you can click on the green Q&A button on the left of your screen, and then you can participate and ask questions. If you're viewing this on YouTube, you're not able to participate live. Now I would like to introduce our guest speaker, Varo Duffins, who is the Senior Associate Director of Financial Aid at Franklin and Marshall College. He has worked in the Office of Financial Aid at F&M since August of 2004, and before that he was the Associate Dean of Admissions. This is his third time presenting to this group, and we hope that you find his presentation useful. If you have any questions directly, as you can see on the screen, there is his email address and telephone number, so feel free to reach out to him directly as well. So Varo, take it away, please.
Thank you, Sonia. Very happy to be back. And when you said I was here, this is the third year you said that I'm doing this, I believe. Welcome to everyone who's listening tonight. As Sonia said, my name is Varo Duffins. I am Senior Associate Director of Financial Aid at Franklin and Marshall College, a small private liberal arts college located in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is about an hour-and-a-half west of Philadelphia. So it is 9 o'clock our time here in Pennsylvania. As Sonia said, I've been in higher education since 1995. Prior to coming into the financial aid office here at Franklin and Marshall College, I worked for 8 years also here at Franklin and Marshall in our Office of Admission, and then prior to that I was in admission for a year at another smaller regional liberal arts college in Pennsylvania called Elizabethtown College. So I've been in higher ed, as I said, for almost 20 years. What we'll do tonight is walk through financial aid, and it's going to be very much of a 101 approach to financial aid. What I'm going to try to do is cover as many of the broad topics as possible, and in some ways information that you may have heard here and there, either at presentations at colleges and universities, or you know, in paying attention to what's in the media in terms of newsprint, or certainly on TV, and obviously on the web. My perspective on financial aid is primarily at a small private college, but with financial aid, there are things that sort of transcend any college or any university and are just sort of basic fundamentals, and that's really what we want to walk through. And at the end, I'll be happy to take questions, and you have my information. That number that you see on the screen is actually my direct number, and it rings right to my telephone, so you can feel free to give me a call. Obviously, whether you're interested in Franklin and Marshall College or just have general questions, which I presume is what most people will want to do. So the first question is, of course, what is financial aid? And that is, you know, the obvious basic question of the evening. In terms of money, money can and is often termed as funds, since there's no real money that transacts at the college level. For the most part, when people are offering financial aid to students, when colleges and universities are offering financial aid to students, it comes through as dollar figures. It is in many ways not real dollars, but just a reduction in the cost that's being offered to students. So the basic term or the basic definition that I would use for financial aid is really what you see on your screen there. It's money that assists students and parents in paying for the cost of college, period. Students and parents are the primary folks that are primarily responsible for funding their education. That's one of those basic maxims that we use in financial aid, and it's something that's very important for students and parents to realize, that first and foremost, no matter what college or university you're attending, most financial aid professionals and just about all financial aid offices are going to approach it with the idea that students and parents will be the first people to try to take care of whatever expenses they can, and whatever they can't, that's when financial aid steps in. So when we talk about financial aid, one of the most important things to realize is what does college really cost? There is a term that I always encourage students and parents to utilize when they're talking to colleges and universities, either on campus, or if you're talking to a coach or a recruiter who's visiting you at your school, or if you're visiting a prospective coach or a team on campus, and certainly if you're at a college fair talking to a college representative, like from somebody from the admission office or somebody who's visiting your high school. Always ask not what is the cost of tuition, but what is the cost of attendance. And that's a very important term, cost of attendance. If you use that term, folks will actually know that you know what you're talking about, because that is the terminology that we use in the financial aid world. Cost of attendance is everything that you see listed there. It's not only just tuition, it's room, it's your meal plan, it's an estimated cost of books, an estimated cost of travel, and then estimated miscellaneous expenses, which could be anything from, toothpaste to, a pizza here and there, that kind of thing. So it really is just those total costs in what my parents would call the full damage, if you will, the cost of attendance. Every institution in the United States of America that uses federal aid, which is most of them, must be able to list and tell prospective students and parents what their cost of attendance is for the year. And as I said, if you note, numbers 1 through 3 are actual costs that you can actually put a sticker on: tuition, room, and meal plan. And then items 4, 5, and 6 are actually estimated costs. Those are just estimates that the institution will come up with as an average to be able to give families and students a general idea as to what costs are. The cost of attendance, in short, is really the measuring stick that we use to assess need and to assess your financial aid. So financial aid exists because college costs money, and as we just talked about, again, these are all the costs. Colleges are businesses. A lot of folks going through the process may not see it that way from the very beginning, but in fact it is. All colleges have a business office. All colleges have an office of admission. All colleges have an office of financial aid. And just like a business, there are CFOs that are in charge of making sure that the tuition revenue is taking care of the operational expenses of the institution, and the student enrollment aspect of that is very, very important. We charge fees for services, so those are included in the costs. And in terms of a business, very important to realize that as students, you are customers, and as customers, you demand certain services, and those services are what the institution is going to offer to you. So how do you get financial aid? In terms of financial aid, you have to apply every year for financial aid by completing and submitting applications online. The most basic one that you will do is the federal government's free application for federal student aid. That's also called the FAFSA. That is an application that for every college or university that you are going to be applying to, you're going to be submitting that. Again, it is the free application for federal student aid. It is literally what it is. It's a free application, and you are applying for federal aid from the federal government, the United States federal government. In submitting the FAFSA, you're also applying not only money from the feds, but also from your state institution if your state offers any kind of state grant or assistance. And then if you're applying to a private college or university, you may be asked to fill out what's called the College Board CSS profile, People call that all kinds of different things. CSS, College Board. Most colleges and universities will call it simply the profile. When you submit the profile, you are essentially applying for institutional aid from the college or university itself. And again, that is the case for many private colleges and universities asking you to fill out the profile. If they don't ask you to fill out the profile, the college or university may have its own financial aid form, something in place of the profile and or in addition to the profile. Whatever it is in terms of 1, 2, and 3, you want to be able to find out from the college or university, what is it that I need to submit to your financial aid office to be sure that I am being considered for all financial aid funds. That is the question you want to ask. And fortunately, all that information is going to be on the website at each college or university. Lastly, point number 4, private or local organizations. You may be affiliated with a private or local organization, either through a club or activity, through your parents or your parents' employer, or your church, your synagogue, your temple. You may also find that you can locate some private or local organizations in your area or even online that may be offering or willing to offer scholarship dollars. The thing I'd say about applying for financial aid is that you're going to want to apply each year, and in most cases the institution is going to insist that you do that. It is not necessarily a fun process to do, but it is fun to be able to receive the aid, especially when you need it. And for the time that you're putting in to submitting the applications, which is probably never more than a nice afternoon on a Saturday or Sunday, the return on that is very, very good. Every question counts. Literally every question counts. When you're filling out the FAFSA from the profile, you want to be very careful about answering the questions as accurately as you can, because the information that goes into it is quantified. Even your parents' date of birth is actually used within the formula to be able to back calculate the number of years that they would have until standard age of retirement, and that actually gets figured in, and that's just one sort of slice through it to emphasize the fact that it is very important to get the information correct. The last thing I'll say on this, because I've been asked this before, when you're filling out this information, don't worry about filling it out correctly because you think you're going to get in trouble if you fill it out incorrectly. It's just not going to happen. Most cases, 99.9% of the time, people are not trying to fill out incorrect information intentionally for the federal government or for an institution. But mistakes will always be made, and colleges and universities actually have a process of verifying your information on the FAFSA and on the profile and on the university form against your federal income taxes. So your job is just to fill out the information, do it as accurately as you can, submit everything to the institution as best as you can and honestly as you can, and let the institution do the verification of that. So in terms of how financial aid actually works, this is the financial aid applications will, as it says here, ask questions about you and your parents' income and assets, which is basically money earned from working and saving, and money that is being saved and invested. Your income and assets are then weighed against all kinds of different factors, but the key factor is your family household, the number of children that you have in your family who will attend college, and to some extent where you live, and as I said earlier, even your parents' ages are considered within it. Everything that we take in the financial aid application is quantified in some important way so that we can assess your family as at a the most granular level, if you will, that we possibly can. The financial aid applications, in many ways, and even the methodology, the formulas that lie behind them that allow us to determine your financial aid, think as much as about the process and your issues as a family as you do. They will not weigh and measure everything to the way that you would want to, because the college or university is worried about hundreds and thousands of students and taking care of them. In a family, you're only worried necessarily about the children that are within that family. But the formula, all the questions that you see when you fill that out, it's literally going to be thinking and acting and worried about the same kinds of things that you are, which is why it's driven by family household size and everything like that. So in terms of using that information, the federal government and the college or university can then determine how much your family can afford to pay toward paying for your education. In other words, we take all your information in, we run it through the methodology and the formulas, and then we come up with how much you can actually, out of your income and assets, given all the other factors, how much can you put forward in a year toward your college education. This is known as your expected family contribution, and it's actually a calculation of both parent income and assets and student income and assets. Once we have the information, and the federal government or the federal government and the college or university determines your EFC, your demonstrated need is then calculated very simply. Okay, a very simple formula, taking the cost, and that's actually the cost of attendance, as we talked about earlier, and those 6 bullet points that I mentioned in the slide several back, minus your expected family contribution, and that equals what's called your demonstrated need. Again, the cost of attendance, the tuition, the room, the meal plan, estimated costs for books and travel and miscellaneous expenses, minus the EFC that we calculate using the information from the FAFSA and the profile and private forms, minus that equals your demonstrated need. So in terms of meeting your need, once we figure out what your demonstrated need is, your demonstrated need is then met with financial aid. And financial aid, simply put, is loans, grants, scholarship, and work study. And basically those amounts are put together in what we call a financial aid, and it is going to be either all of those things or a combination of those. All of the amounts of the loans, the grants, scholarship, and work study are going to be used toward meeting your demonstrated need. Schools can meet up to 100% of your demonstrated need. And that's an important note. A school can meet up to 100% of your demonstrated need. Or schools that meet your need can meet your need to the extent that you value in the school. So as you are looking at the process and you are going through and you're trying to figure out, well, which school will meet 100% and what school says that they won't necessarily meet 100%, you have to figure out between those schools or among those schools which ones you value most in terms of what that package looks like at the end of the day. So a little bit about loans, grants, and work study. We break financial aid and loans, grants, and work study into 2 primary categories. One is called self-help, and the other is called gift aid. Self-help is aid that you must pay back or earn, simply put. So a student loan, like any loan, is a loan from the federal government. You can also borrow loans from private lenders or banks. Federal work study for United States citizens that fill out the FAFSA basically allows you to work and earn money via a campus job. And all colleges and universities can approach that however they wish. A standard model for students that are working work study is that you may be packaged with, say, $2,000 of federal work study. And the college may say to you, you are welcome to find a campus job that will pay you, say, federal minimum wage or more, which federal minimum wage right now is $7.25 an hour, and you are allowed to work, whatever the institution says, 10 hours a week, 15 hours a week. I believe some institutions have even allowed students to work up to 20 hours a week. And basically, as you earn that money goes into your checking or banking or checking or savings account directly. And then those funds are used however those funds need to be used by you. Again, that can vary from institution to institution. That's actually how our program works here and how a lot of programs work across the United States. So when you see federal work study in a package, it's not money that you have yet. It's basically an allowance for you to be able to work on campus and earn up to that amount. And then there are parent loans that parents can take from the federal government, and they can also borrow from private lenders or banks as well. But there is a parent loan that is offered by the federal government called the Federal Parent Plus Loan, PLUS in all caps. and I'll talk about that in a few slides. And then, of course, there's gift aid, and that's aid that you do not need to pay back. This is the sweet stuff that everybody looks for. This is need-based grants from the federal government, or need-based grants from the college or the university, or scholarship grants from the college. And scholarships can be based on, you know, anything from academics to athletics to co-curricular talents and interests. And you know, of course, with scholarships, you may have to apply specially or separately from general admission to the college or university. In many cases, scholarships are awarded by the Office of Admission, not necessarily by the Office of Financial Aid. And again, that's not conclusive, but in a lot of cases, that's how it works, because the Office of Admission is evaluating your credentials and your application for admission, and they're actually looking for things in terms of academic, athletic, or co-curricular talent or prowess to be able to offer you a scholarship, and then they will inform the financial aid office, and the financial aid office will then put that scholarship into your package. But that's basically how financial aid, loans, grants, and work study come together. Deadlines, hugely important. You couldn't open a newspaper or a web page or anything that's not talking these days about making sure that you meet deadlines. It's always been the case. One way that colleges manage who qualifies for financial aid and who does not is simply by setting deadlines. And students that don't meet the deadlines may find themselves out of consideration for certain types of aid, or out of consideration for as much aid as they may have qualified for. And again, that can really depend on how the institution wishes to facilitate their financial aid program. Deadlines vary depending on the type of aid. So the FAFSA, federal aid, the deadline that the institution may set is usually as early as February. When it comes to the profile and the college aid, it depends on the college. It can also depend on the process to which you apply. So if you were thinking about applying early decision or early action versus regular decision, which is later on in the process, the deadlines for those programs will also change, especially with the profile. The FAFSA is not available until January 1 of each year. So January 1 of your senior year, the FAFSA would come online for you to be able to apply for aid for that year. The profile, however, becomes available around October 1 of your senior year. So if you are a student that is thinking about applying early decision or early action in the fall of your senior year, and you are applying to a private college or university, they may in fact have you complete the profile before the FAFSA was even available, to be able to predict your financial aid based upon the profile. Scholarship applications obviously have their own deadlines, and again, that depends on the college or the organization that's sponsoring it. Everything that you can find out about deadlines these days, of course, is on the web. So it's actually very easy to figure out where everything is. The good news about the deadlines is that deadlines, for the most part, fall in sync with different colleges and universities, and specifically colleges and universities that are similar or in some ways alike in size or scope. They will have deadlines that are often very, very similar. So it's not as if you should be chasing a lot of different deadlines all over the place. Everything is pretty much tailored. So deadlines for your first year are going to be a little earlier, because colleges and universities will work with students who are applying for their first year of entry a little earlier in the year. And then after you are a college student, you'll have to, as I said earlier, reapply for financial aid each year, and the deadlines tend to be a little later for students in their returning year. So we talked about this earlier, but again, a financial aid package is simply the combination of loans, grants, scholarship, or work study, and the financial aid that is offered to you. So just to give you a very quick example of how this may work, if a school has a total cost of attendance of $40,000, and again, that would be tuition, room, meal plan, estimated cost of books, estimated cost of travel, and estimated cost of miscellaneous expenses, minus $15,000 of the expected family contribution that is determined by the information on the FAFSA and or the FAFSA and the profile by the college or university. this student or this family in this case would have a demonstrated financial need of $25,000. $40,000 minus the $15,000, $25,000 of demonstrated financial need. And then in terms of meeting that demonstrated financial need, here's a possible example of a college that would meet 100% of it. A first-year student might be packaged in this case with $3,500 of federal direct loan. They may be packaged with $2,000 of federal Perkins loan, $2,000 of federal work study, $5,000 of scholarship grant, and $12,000 of college need-based grant. And that adds up to $25,000 of the total package, and in this case, of course, 100% of the need is met. It's important when I show these slides that you understand that these amounts can change depending on the college or university and how they choose to utilize the funds that they've been given by the federal government or by their institution. So don't lock in exactly on the amounts that you see on the screen here. But again, this just shows one example. So here's an example, slightly different, of a school that would meet 80% of demonstrated need, and you can see all the components are the same except for the college need-based grant would be $7,500 in this case, and that's a $20,000 total package, or 80% of the need is met. Or another way of putting it is $5,000 short of meeting need, and another term that you may hear is that $5,000 has been gapped. The net price calculator is a very important tool. One of the terms is probably overused, but I'll overuse it even some more, is that it's a game changer. Almost exactly 3 years ago, it was at the end of October of 2011, the federal government instituted a mandate that every college or university that utilizes Title IV, or that's another way of saying federal financial aid and financial aid programs, must have on their website something called a net price calculator. Those 3 words exactly. In fact, part of the mandate a little bit later was that colleges and universities have to call it a net price calculator. So you should be able to go to any college or university website and go into their search box on their main page and put in those 3 words, net price calculator, and it should take you to the page on their website that has their net price calculator. More than likely, it will be on the financial aid page. So what exactly is it? What it is exactly what you want it to be. It is a quick, free calculator that basically allows you to put in your basic information in terms of information about your family size, the number of children that you have in your family, the number of children in college, and then information about your and your parents' income and assets. And then you'd be able to actually, literally after 10 or 15 minutes of entering this very basic information, hit the return, and it will actually produce for you, in most cases, what the net price is going to be, which is the total cost of attendance minus all gift aid or grant aid that you've been offered by the college. Again, that's the total cost of attendance minus all gift and grant aid. That's what's considered to be the net price, and the net price also includes in that calculation the amount of loans that have been packaged to you. Some net price calculators will even go farther than just offering you the net price. They will actually offer you the entire package. In other words, the package components of loans and grants and work study or scholarship will actually be broken out for you so that you can see what your package would actually look like. The estimate that you receive on your screen within a couple of minutes is not guaranteed. So there's nothing that you can do in terms of being able to print out the screen and take it to the school and say, this is what I expect to get. This is all estimated information, and it's all information that, quite frankly, is generated on abbreviated information. So the information you're putting into the net price calculator is not going to be as extensive as the information you're going to put into the FAFSA and the profile, but it hits the major points, and it essentially, presuming you give it good information and presuming that the net price calculator at the institution is pretty good, will put you into the neighborhood. So some more expensive schools, as you see, may end up costing less in final net price. compared to some schools that may have a smaller cost of attendance. And so I emphasize this point to say simply this: if you're looking at colleges and universities, if you know that you're going to need financial aid, do not be dissuaded by the high cost of attendance at an institution until you have investigated at least the net price calculator to see where the costs come out. Because you could in fact end up attending a much higher price institution and receive enough financial aid that it becomes less expensive for you to attend that institution than it would be an institution that has a much lower cost of attendance, and that's very important. We talked a little bit about early decision or an early action. Early decision is binding. It's a binding commitment to the college. You're essentially applying and saying, if you admit me, I am coming. It happens earlier in the process. Most early decision programs are happening in terms of timeline in November of your senior year, and providing decisions to students in December. Some institutions may even have multiple rounds of early decision. We have that here at Franklin and Marshall, where there's a second round of early decision with a January deadline, and students can find out in February. And of course, you wouldn't have to do both if there are 2 rounds. You can choose either one you want. Early action, very simple, very similar. Also an earlier deadline to apply, but with early action, there's no binding commitment. So you can apply early, you can find out a decision early, and then you can still remain in the applicant pool at other institutions and wait to see what other packages look like, but you are not committed. Applying early moves up everything in the financial aid process, and it speeds it up by at least a few months. It is at times can be somewhat confusing if you're not completely clear and straight as to what the deadlines are and how that works. My advice to students and parents at this point is not to try to overthink all the logistics of the process, but to simply follow the deadlines for whatever process you're going through. So if you're thinking about early decision, find out what the early decision deadlines are and do exactly as the institution tells you to do it, and everything will come online. Everything will be fine. Early applications, whether early decision or early action, are based on estimated information, because we are actually, for our students who will be applying early decision here in the next month or so, they're going to be trying to estimate their parents and their 2014 tax year information, which of course hasn't ended as of yet. So they're going to be using an estimate for that. Once we use that estimate, we're trying to package students and give them an answer early, and then we will verify their actual information sometime in 2015. It's sort of the process catches up. And again, the logistics of it are not something you want to worry about as much as actually just following through with the process and letting the college or university take care of it. Some colleges may offer a special early review for students considering early decision, because if you are thinking about early decision, especially an institution that costs a lot of money, at least a lot of money in terms of what you feel your family can afford, some institutions will offer you an opportunity to essentially give you an estimated package before you even sign the binding commitment. In other words, it's sort of the institution doing a net price calculator review for you, so that you can be sure, or at least as close to sure, what it may cost before you sign on for early decision. So how much can you borrow in loans? In terms of loans, dependent undergraduate students can borrow federal direct Stafford loans up to $5,500 in your first year, and up to $3,500 of that $5,500 can be subsidized, meaning that the interest is paid by the government while you're in school. In your second year or your sophomore year, you would be able to borrow up to $6,500 of federal direct Stafford loan. This is for students. Up to $4,500 of that $6,500 can be subsidized. In your third year and beyond, $7,500 of federal direct Stafford loan, and up to $5,500 of that $7,500 can be subsidized. And as you can see, the interest rates for the subsidized and unsubsidized loans are actually the same. The difference with subsidized is that the government is paying that interest while you're in school, so they are subsidizing it, versus an unsubsidized loan where the interest is actually accruing while you're in school. And of course, with the federal loans, you'll begin repayment 6 months after graduation, or if you fall below half-time enrollment, which is another thing to take note of, because as you go through this process, as you become a college student, you want to make sure that you are making satisfactory academic progress, which is actually a term we use in financial aid, SAP, satisfactory academic progress, so that you are constantly moving forward, that you're passing your courses, and that you're taking to the best of your ability the fullest load of courses that you possibly can for which you qualify in financial aid and in your loans and grants. Dependent undergraduate students may also borrow another federal loan. It's called the Federal Perkins Loan, and you can borrow up to $5,500 a year. But because the Perkins Loan is given to institutions in a set amount, it depends upon the college how much they may allocate to you, and it will depend upon how much they actually have to allocate. In a lot of cases, because the Federal Perkins Loan Program is sort of a recycling program for institutions, meaning there's no real new money coming into it, institutions will determine on their own how much they're going to give, and in a lot of cases the Perkins Loan is given to students who are of the higher need students on a college campus. The total that you can borrow in Perkins Loan is $27,500, and the interest rate is fixed at 5%, and it's actually been fixed at 5% for as long as I can remember, quite frankly. You begin repayment 9 months after graduation, or again if you fall below half-time enrollment. So you always want to stay fully enrolled if you possibly can. Other types of loans, we touched on this earlier. This is the Federal Parent Plus Loan. It carries a fixed interest rate of 7.21% for this current year. It is a loan that parents can borrow on behalf of their students. It's based on creditworthiness or their FICO score. A lot of commercials out there about credit score and FICO score. That's what that's referring to. Students borrow for the students that they're borrowing for must submit a FAFSA in order to qualify for it. And here's the key for parents: you're able to borrow up to that total annual cost of attendance minus all the financial aid that has been accepted by the student. So that total cost of attendance, again, there's that term, minus all the financial aid, basically is the out-of-pocket expense that most parents worry about. How do I, after the financial aid, how do I cover the rest of that? The Federal Parent Plus Loan allows you to borrow up to that full amount. Repayment begins for parent loans each year after the loan fully disperses. In plain English, that means it will disperse usually around March of a standard academic year each year. Excuse me, sorry. And the repayment on that is roughly $50 a month for every $4,000 borrowed. The other option, of course, is the private student loan. And I should probably add that that's also an option for parents as well, to be borrowed by private banks and lenders. It usually does require a creditworthy cosigner if students borrow it. The interest rates tend to be higher and or adjustable. We have found that some of the private alternative loans, however, actually have more competitive rates than some of the other loans out there. So it is always recommended that students and parents maximize your federal loans before entering into the world of private student loans, but those options are out there, and the financial aid office at whatever college or university you're looking at can give you a list of private or alternative lenders that students have tended to use over the years at those institutions. They can actually provide you with that list. So some things to consider about student debt, since we're talking about that. Because there is a lot of information out there about student debt. A lot of things in the newspaper, a lot of things on the news, obviously a lot of websites, and a lot of horror stories about student debt. The facts are that it has topped consumer debt at over $1 trillion. It does vary from state to state. The debt levels of public and private not-for-profit schools are tracked by the federal government. Student debt levels for privates are not tracked as easily, if at all, and for-profit schools are institutions, obviously, some of which you may see advertised on television, but for-profit institutions are just that. They're basically businesses that operate a lot of times online for college and university students, and you can borrow loans, obviously, to attend those as well, but because they're not tracked as easily through the federal program, the data on those is not tracked as accurately as the other. Just a quick factoid: in 2012, 71% of all students graduating from four-year colleges had student loan debt, which is about 1.3 million students in the U.S. populace. And you can see the percentages of how that breaks down among the different institutions: public colleges, private nonprofit, and then for-profit institutions. So average debt level for students, seniors who graduated in 2012, was $29,400. The biggest takeaway for student loans is that you should only borrow what you need to borrow, and you should stay within the federal borrowing as much as possible, which reverts back to the last slide where I suggested that you should always maximize your federal loan that you've been offered before you start borrowing private loan. So be a smart consumer when you go through this process. The most important thing that you can do and the biggest favor you can give to yourself and to your parents is to ask a lot of questions. Ask if they meet 100% of demonstrated need. Ask if the school offers need-based aid, or if they offer merit-based or scholarship aid, or both. Ask if applying for financial aid can affect your chances for admission. At some private institutions, that may in fact be the case. Ask if the college uses preferential packaging, meaning do you package my financial aid based upon the strength of my credentials in the applicant pool. So if I am at the very top of the applicant pool, will I have more gift aid, versus if I am at the bottom of the accepted pool, will I have less gift aid? How does that work? If you're applying early decision or early action, does that affect your aid package? If you are considering early decision, do you offer the early estimate that I talked about earlier? Do you offer some way for me to know before I sign on the dotted line if there's some way for me to figure out what the costs are going to be? Ask about the aid applications that you require for full financial aid consideration. This goes back to the very beginning when I said finding out if the school requires or requests you to fill out the FAFSA or the profile or both, or their own aid application on top of that. Whatever they require for full consideration of aid, that's what you want to go after. Ask about how scholarships that you receive from private sources may affect your financial aid. Sometimes that does. So if you were to win a $2,000 scholarship after you've been admitted and committed to an institution, and you found out about it in the late spring or the early summer after you graduated from high school, you want to ask the institution to find out, how's that going to be used? If I win this $2,000, does it displace some of the aid that you've offered? And if it does displace the aid, does it displace grant? Does it displace loan or work study? Or is it just put on top of my package as it is? How does that work? You want to be asking that question. Will I be allowed to apply for financial aid every year? I underscore be allowed because while it may seem like a favor to not have to apply for financial aid every year, most institutions, of course, do have you apply each year, and as I said, it's not necessarily a fun process, but it's something that you definitely want to do because things change from year to year, and sometimes things can change even between from year to year. So, leading to that point, how do you handle circumstances that change finances for me or my parents in the middle of the year? Okay. To be more specific, what happens if my mom or dad loses a job? What happens if they lose hours at work? God forbid if something happens to them health-wise or worse. What exactly happens? If something happens to your family beyond your family's control, you want to be asking the institution before you enroll, how do you handle these situations? How do you handle these circumstances, especially in 2014 in this economy? Very, very important question to be asking. And of course, you want to ask, how accurate is your net price calculator? Looks like I put in double accurate there. Sorry about that. How accurate is your net price calculator? Is it accurate? Will it give me a fairly reliable package and result, presuming that I'm giving it good information? Or is it a net price calculator that may not put me in the ballpark and may not even the neighborhood, but maybe somewhere in the county or the state? Or how does that work exactly? Most institutions will be able to tell you how accurate their net price calculator predicts information, and that's definitely a question that you should be asking as a smart consumer. So the other thing you can do is download and read the Student Debt and Class of 2012. This came out in December of 2013. It's a very important report that's released, and I think my understanding is that it's done every year, and updated. The Project on Student Debt and the initiative of the Institute for College Access and Success sponsors this. The website for the PDF is, as you can see it right below. And again, if you want a copy of that web link after the presentation, I'm happy to send that to you, but you'll also have that as well. That is a lot of deep and heavy reading. It's the kind of reading that you should read late at night if you want to be helped to sleep a bit. But when you wake up, you'll be filled with lots of good information about student debt. And it's also a good tool for you to read some of the facts and figures and factoids, so that when you hear the things that you're hearing about the horror stories about student debt, understand that student debt is actually good investment debt. As a higher educational and professional, I will always believe that student debt is good investment, and is good leverage for your future. So things to consider as you go through. So basic tenets, just to kind of finish up here, the basic tenets of financial aid that will always keep you sort of flying straight and online. As I said from the beginning, you and your parents are responsible first and foremost for paying for your education. Prioritize your expenses in that regard, and you should be fine. Get organized, stay organized, submit everything at least 3 days, if not more, before the deadline, just to stay on target. Again, deadlines tend to line up, especially if you're looking at a lot of colleges and universities that tend to be of similar type and shape and size and feel and flavor. The deadlines will actually line up fairly well for you. So go to the website, make note of the deadlines, do what you need to do, and stay within that, and you'll be fine. And then, of course, read, stay informed, stay engaged, care, ask questions, just stay in the game. I mean, as athletes, it's always an important thing to kind of keep your head in the game and keep your eyes on the field, so that you know exactly what you need to do and when you're going to be called into play. And that's literally what happens here in financial aid. So if you just stay on top of it, you stay informed, and of course, with everything that's out there, especially at this time of year, very, very easy to do. And the last thing I'll say is this: especially if you're going to do some searching on the web for scholarship opportunities, or you're trying to find money, do not ever, 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 ever pay money for financial aid, ever. If you go to a website and they're asking you to submit $50 so that you can apply for X scholarship or whatever, do not do it. Okay, go to some of the more reputable sites, which I've listed here, that will provide you with general information without a sales pitch, or the reputable free scholarship search sites, fastweb.com, collegeboard.com. One I've added this year is capex.com. This came into my attention a couple of years ago. I've not been promoting it, not because there's anything wrong with it necessarily, but just because I haven't been as familiar with it. But my understanding from folks over the last couple of years is that it's actually served folks fairly well. If you were to find different for any of those sites, I'd appreciate you letting me know. But those are the three sites that I kind of keep etched on the palm of my hand. In terms of the general information about financial aid, FAFSA.gov, studentaid.gov, that will give you all the information you could possibly ever want to know about the federal aid program. Fin.org is actually a site that still houses a lot of really good information, everything from 101 to 801 level information. It is not a site that is updated and published any longer, but it still holds sort of a reservoir, an encyclopedia of good information about financial aid in language that's very, very helpful. So that's the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take questions now, or if you have questions for me at some other point, feel free to email me and or call and just let me know that you were part of Positive Coaching Alliance and the presentation today, and that you were online, or that you picked up the YouTube video at some point later and you just have questions. I'll be happy to do that.
Hi, Varo. I have one question. You gave a lot of great websites to find out information about financial aid, and I'm just wondering if there's a specific person that you would suggest or recommend that students contact within the financial aid department at specific schools.
That's a great question. Thank you. It depends on the institution, to be honest with you. Some larger institutions, you can call the financial aid office. The most important thing that you can say when you're on the phone, first and foremost, right away, is whether or not you are a current or a prospective student. Then provide your name very clearly. This all seems kind of rudimentary, but it's actually very important in terms of getting the service that you want. And the person answering the phone will actually direct you to the correct financial aid counselor or advisor in that office that you'll want to speak to. Some institutions, like ours, actually break everything down into letters of the alphabet. So in our office, we have 3 general counselors, and we've broken the entire alphabet down into 3 of us. So I handle all students that have a last name of A through G, for example, whether they are a prospective student or a current student. That way we can kind of keep track of conversations, and people, students and parents can feel like they're able to connect with us. But again, we're a small school, so larger schools will have different kinds of setups, but the most important thing is just to let them know who you are and why you're calling, and they'll take care of that.
Great. This is Sonia from Positive Coaching Alliance. Just giving people a couple more moments to see if anyone has any questions that they want to ask via the chat, but we're not getting anything. So I definitely want to thank Varo for this awesome presentation. Super helpful, as it is every year. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise. You're really just a wealth of knowledge, and also for offering for students to contact you with any additional questions.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
So I wish everyone a good night, and talk to you next Google Hangout, October 21st at 6 p.m. Pacific. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.